and a very warm welcome to the show. And I'm really looking forward to diving into a topic today that I'm hearing being spoken about in many places at the moment, which is how can leaders create certainty when there's such a lack of it? And at the time of recording this, it is almost the time of the tennis competition, Wimbledon, here in London, the UK. And I got thinking that leadership today is very much like playing tennis. But more about that in a minute, and I will explain why during this episode. This thought came up to me because I recently attended the CIPD Festival of Work. Now, this is a large global conference held here in London for HR professionals and for anybody working in the people support space. So it was a 2-day event, and there were a variety of events from speakers to panels to roundtables. And as you can imagine, in this particular space, there was a huge amount of talk around AI, the way that AI is changing work. How should people manage this going forward? How should leaders lead through this? What are the key moments right now? And one of the things that I really enjoyed about this kind of event is listening clearly to speakers, meeting new people, and also reconnecting with some familiar faces as well. But it sparked an idea because as I was coming back from that, those couple of days, as I was reflecting on everything that I had been listening to, hearing, the conversations that I've been having, I had a realization that although there was a variety of topics and angles out on the idea of AI and how it's impacting people at work, and there were also many angles from psychological safety to employee experience. Ultimately, it's the same challenge. How do leaders adapt and lead when nobody really knows what's coming next? Now, I think that's always been true. I think, there's always been a sense that leaders often are having to create that certainty in an uncertain world. But it feels like, particularly at this moment in time, that rate of uncertainty has accelerated. The future is even more unpredictable. So the question that we need to ask is, what do we do with this? If you're somebody who's a leader listening to this, or somebody who wants to be a leader, how do you manage the uncertainty for other people, for your team, for your people? And the thought that really came to me is you can give clarity even if you can't give certainty. And today's episode, I'm going to share my thoughts on how you can do this. And I know that from my conversations with the people that I support and help, whether they are senior leaders, emerging leaders, newly promoted leaders, that I'm hearing a number of different questions coming up to do and reflections on how they're doing work today. And it's often in these private conversations, in these one-to-one reflections, that people are really open about the questions that come up, the self-doubt. What if I'm setting the wrong direction? What if I don't know enough? What if somebody challenges me? What if we make the wrong decision here? And, what if things change? There are a lot of questions I find people are asking themselves, particularly in this moment. And the hidden assumption that sits behind that is there's this sense that good leaders should have all the answers, that they should have that confidence to know and have the certainty, that they should have the expertise to be credible and the authority to create that direction. But what if leadership now is not about this? What if it's not about having all the answers? I think that this old leadership style and model is gone. I think it's really in the past. And it's something fascinatingly I was reflecting on from my own first career in brand marketing. and the leaders that I looked up to, and how I saw leadership when I was in that space as well. And it was that sense that the leader was an expert and an authority in their area. And I know today that even some of the leaders I'm working with today have become those leaders because they are technical experts in what they do and have naturally progressed along that way towards leadership. Also, it was very much in the past about prediction, control, having the answers. And people look to leaders to kind of create that sense of structure. But of course, the current reality is nothing like that. And I'm sure whatever industry you're in or whatever level you're at within your career right now, you recognize that as well. I think that clearly AI is changing things so much faster than ever before. And things are happening incredibly frequently. And then you've got a layer on top of that of economic uncertainty, global instability, and of course, so much organizational change going on right now as well. And I see that a lot across industries, again, and organizations that I support, but also with the individuals that I'm supporting, my coaching clients. Many of their organizations are going through some form of reorganization as we speak. So this is just the normal way of the life, the way things are in the workplace today. Also layer on top of that information overload, data overload, and it's clear why it's so difficult to give that certainty today. When I also thought back to my previous days in brand marketing, often I would work on an annual planning cycle, and we would develop a 3-year, actually in one industry, I was developing 5-year strategic plans. And yet that idea feels a bit laughable today. How can we even predict what's going to happen next month, let alone next year or 3 or 5 years' time? And I think when I was at CIPD at the conference, there was one speaker called Natal Dank who put it really clearly. She said, we're leading in change, not through change. And what she was really drawing out here is that change isn't a temporary state of affairs. It's not that we're trying to get to a destination where things are going to settle down and we're going to get through the turbulence like you're on a plane. In fact, uncertainty is no longer a phase or temporary. It's just the environment. It's the context. It's the base case. And so if you are a leader of people in any way or form, then you need to recognize this and then adapt your leadership to create clarity. As I mentioned at the beginning, what if it's not about certainty, but providing that clarity? Because the idea of giving a context for certainty, where you're looking at the future and predicting and forecasting and budgeting what happens next, that feels a little bit outdated today. I understand that many organizations and companies are asking that, but that's also trying to create a reality that may change next week, even tomorrow. Instead, I think it is much more important today for leaders to create a current clarity, to be very present focused, to be very honest about what's happening, what is known and what is not known, because clearly that is the point. There is no picture where we have all the answers today. I think the other current clarity, which I hear increasingly people talking about, is the need for experimentation. So rather than creating, this is the plan, and then if that doesn't work, maybe having a plan B, instead treating the work, the projects, the missions that you're working on, the goals you're working towards as a team, as a series of experiments which are time-bound, which have criteria for success, and you're measuring and adjusting continuously as you go along. I feel like this is very much the role of the leader today, to set that direction for the first experiment, to understand what the series of experiments looks like and adjust along the way. And this is where we're going to come back to tennis. I said I would come back to this idea of Wimbledon and why leadership is like world-class tennis. This is the comparison I want you to think about, because what world-class tennis players are amazing at is moving. They move so fast across the court. They know how to get from one side to the other in literally a couple of steps. They are having to respond incredibly fast to the shots that are coming their way. They're unpredictable. Are they going to go to the left or the right or high or to the back or come up to the front? I'm not an expert tennis player. However, when I watch Wimbledon and I watch the tennis players, you can see how fast they're moving. And what always happens at the end of the move, they come back to center. I'm just going to repeat that. They come back to center. And why? They come back to center because that's where they can regroup, ground themselves again, pick up the vision again, and work out where they're going to move to next. Not from off center, but back in the middle. And that's the idea that I want you to take away from this, because as a leader, you need to clearly make all the moves. It needs to be fast with your team to be able to respond what's coming your way, whether those are external factors or internal. But then you need to come back to center and go, where did we get to? Let's create clarity for the next move. Let's go again. So the questions that I think leaders can be asking and answering is, what matters right now? Now, it is up to you to define what right now means, whether we mean today, this week, this month, or possibly this year. Although I'd argue, actually, this year is a long time in this current time frame. Also, I want you to be asking, what are we focusing on this week? What do we know today? Where are the knowledge gaps? What are our best next steps? That's a really important question, because it acknowledges that those are the best next steps with what you know, and they will help you move you forward. And then the ultimate question, the final question you have to be asking as a leader to your team is, how can we ensure everybody's on the same page? Alignment. Alignment is a core topic. And interestingly, when I did a poll recently on LinkedIn asking what are the leadership challenges that people are experiencing today, alignment came up. And that idea of creating clarity, communicating with clarity, what the current plan is very important. And just like being the tennis player, you're going to move, you're going to change. But if you don't communicate it, people get confused. They get frustrated. People are working on the old plan, not the new plan. So your ability as a leader to create that clarity through the way you communicate what the focus and priority is right now is incredibly important. But it's not a one-off activity. You need to keep communicating. And that's where, once again, I'm going to repeat this, you can give clarity even if you can't give certainty. So what do people actually need from you? They don't actually need your certainty, or maybe they would like that, but you can't give that right now. So they need your honesty. They need a direction, and to be clear with them that that direction may change. They need your transparency, and they absolutely need your communication consistency. So everybody has a common view of what the mission is, what the goal is. When it comes to psychological safety, clearly one of the things that can happen in environments where there is a lot of change going on is that people create their own narrative. They create their own version of what they think is happening. And this is where, particularly if there's challenging situations like reorganizations happening in your workplace. Rumors start, people create their own stories. If there's delayed communication or inconsistent communication, people are trying to create their own certainty by filling in the gaps of what they think is happening, what they believe is going to happen. And another speaker at CIPD, at the Festival of Work, Diana Osegi, talked about that clarity is kindness. And I think that's really true. That deeply resonated with me, because ultimately, even if the message is negative, even if it's impacting people personally and professionally, that clarity gives them a sense of where they're at, rather than them having to fill in the gaps and create their own certainty through making the stories. And this links very clearly to the work that I do, the 4 pillars in my work that also feature in my book, Become a Global Leader. The first pillar is confidence. This moment requires confidence in leaders, even without having the clear picture, even without the certainty, the confidence to keep stepping forward, to be honest and sometimes vulnerable about not having that certainty, not having that full picture. The second pillar is clarity. Well, we've talked about clarity a lot today in this episode, how important your clarity of communication is to be able to give people that sense of direction and help give them that sense of purpose, that things are moving forward, even if the ultimate eventuality, the ultimate iteration is not clear. The third pillar is challenging conversations. I know there are many challenging conversations happening within organizations right now to do with people changes and moves and redundancies. Your ability as a leader to create clarity through your communication, even with challenging conversations, is a really critical skill. The fourth and final pillar is connection. And I think probably, as I always say, this is probably one of the most important pillars and is something that we have talked about actually throughout the thread of today's episode. Ultimately, this is about recognizing as humans, we do, of course, want certainty, but clearly as a leader, you can't always give it. So your connection to your team, your people, having the empathy to recognize where they're at and what is causing their concerns, to listen, to understand that also people have very different relationships to risk and uncertainty, which can be culturally driven. In fact, in my work in cultural intelligence, there is one of the behavioral preferences in the assessments I do is all around this, your relationship to uncertainty. And for some people, this is really difficult, while others find it easier. And I'm sure you recognize this within your own team. Ultimately, this is about creating your connection to your team. And we've mentioned it a few times already, but that recognition that you don't have to give that certainty, but you do give that clarity. You can give that communication clarity. So a couple of questions for you to reflect on as we come towards the end of this episode. The first one is, what can you create clarity on today? In your team, as the leader, what is something that you can create clarity on, but also really importantly, communicate clearly? And the second question is, how are you going to play tennis and get back to center? We started with Wimbledon, we close with Wimbledon. You are, as a leader, a world-class tennis player. Help your team to make the moves fast, but then come back to center each time. The CIPD Festival of Work, as you can see, sparked lots of ideas and thoughts for me. I found it very energizing, very inspiring, and it's something that really got me thinking and reflecting. I hope these reflections have helped you here today, and it is something that I'm a very great believer in, always putting yourself in new environments, new contexts to learn. I'm as much a learner and growing myself as I hope you are as well through listening to these podcasts. And if you want to go deeper on these topics to understand more about the 4 pillars, then I do encourage you to come and buy a copy of my book, Become a Global Leader, where you can deep dive into each of those 4 pillars: confidence, clarity, challenging conversations, and connection. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I'd also love for you to share this episode. If this episode has resonated, if it's connected with you and you've learned something valuable from this, I'd love for you to share this with a colleague, a peer, your manager, somebody in your team who would benefit from this. I am on a real mission to share this more broadly around the world, and I'd love, if this is something that has connected with you today, to also share that. Thank you so much, as ever, for listening. It's such a pleasure to create these episodes, and I very much look forward to seeing you next time on the show.